Tabletop games are not improv, in the theatrical performance sense. At least our home games aren't. But the act of improvisation is definitely a part of the game, and it's a part that a lot of people find really difficult. Part of a dungeon master's job is reacting on the spot to the unexpected things that your players do, like using dragon poop for scent camouflage or inventing MLMs. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Dave. I'm the one who's supposed to be playing the villains. When people are trying to improve this skill, they often look to improv as a guide. And one of the most popular improv tactics that's made its way into D&D circles is the concept of yes and. Don't get me wrong, I do think this concept can be helpful. There's a reason it is such popular advice for DMs, but I don't think it should stand alone. If yes and is the only tool in your toolbox, it can create new problems and ultimately make DMing harder. Even though I always carry a sword, it isn't the correct tool for every situation. Sometimes you need a dagger. I have a better tool to help DMs who struggle with thinking on their feet during sessions. But in order to understand it, we have to first understand yes and. This term comes from improvisational comedy. Think Whose Line Is It Anyway? Or those events that your weird cousin keeps inviting you to on Facebook, where it's often taught as a sort of golden rule. It's a way to build scenes collaboratively and keep the momentum going. When an actor introduces a concept, their scene partner accepts it. That's the yes, and then adds to it. That's the and. This is normally used when setting up the premise for the skit. For example, if one actor says, "Man, it sure is tough working at the rubber chicken factory," their partner might respond with something like, "Yes, and finding a human eyeball in the latex injection mold this morning sure didn't make it any easier." This is why I didn't get invited back to improv club. Of course, it's also important to note that not every improv actor even likes yes and. Some have argued that it goes against the fundamental spontaneity of improv to force that kind of structure on a scene. But as we've already established, D&D is not improv. So how can this tool be applied at the game table? And should it? First, a brief disclaimer. All of this is founded on the assumption that your players are operating in good faith. If your players are actively trying to break the game or cheat, you don't need improv tools, you need better players. Got it? Okay, cool. Imagine this. Your party has just barely scraped by an encounter with a fire giant, and they've had the absolute crap burned out of them. One of your players has already established that their father was a healer, so they might say, "Hey, did my dad teach me to make any kind of salve to treat burns?" If a DM wanted to use the yes and technique here, they might say, "Yes, and the main ingredient is a flower that you've seen growing in this area." This rewards your player for involving their backstory and thinking immersively about their character's experience in the world. For most of us, this is a good habit and something we want to encourage at our tables. And to be clear, I think this example is great. I would totally do this at my table. They'd have to roll some kind of check to make the salve, and I'd be careful to limit its healing power so that I'm not totally screwing my future game balance, but I would let it happen. I understand why so many people suggest the yes and principle to game masters, especially because some DMs say no more than an 8-year-old on a power trip with a new babysitter. If the DM expected the players to fight some bandits, they might feel unprepared if the players decide to set a trap instead. During those times, it can be tempting, especially for a DM who isn't confident in their ability to improvise, to just tell the players, "No, you can't set a trap, that's impossible, I'm telling my mom." And for those DMs, the yes and principle can be a good reminder to stay open to player creativity. But also, not every situation is a yes and situation. There are absolutely times when a yes isn't good for the game, or even isn't possible. And if you have a party that's willing to exploit your generosity, you can quickly end up with a game that spirals out of control if the players aren't given any limits. Well, I have good news. Yes and does not have to be a standalone tool. It can be 25% of a bigger, better tool. And that's because both halves of yes and have a counterpart, no and but. May I present the yes, no, and but grid? The YNAB. It's fine, we're workshopping it. Imagine that your party is at a royal ball, and the rogue asks if they'd be able to sneak poison into the king's advisor's wine goblet while no one is looking. Here's how each option on the grid might look. Yes, and all eyes are on the king right now as he gives his address, making a perfect opportunity for you to do so unnoticed. Yes, but the king's goblet is very close to the advisor's, so you'll have to be careful to target the right one. Roll an intelligence check to see if you can figure out which is which. No, and you notice that the advisor doesn't seem to have a goblet of wine. He appears to be trying to keep his head clear tonight. No, but you see a servant getting ready to serve bowls of soup to the head table, including the advisor, and those could be accessed without being seen. Anytime you're faced with a situation you didn't anticipate, start with 2 decisions. Ask yourself, is this something that would even be possible in this situation? That's the yes or the no. Then you either explain why it's a yes or no with an and, or introduce new information with a but. Either way, you're giving your players context for whatever call you've made. This quick 2-step process reminds you to react not based on what you want or expect players to do, but based on what the story can support. The question isn't, do I want them to poison the advisor? It's, is it realistic for them to be able to poison the advisor? Is this court well defended against espionage or assassination attempts, or is their security lax? How crowded is this royal ball? How attentive or distracted is the advisor? Are your players trusted in this space, or would they be viewed with suspicion? I'm not saying you can't factor your own direction for the game into decisions like this. I know this might be controversial, but if you have big plans for the advisor and you've done a lot of work on those plans already, I don't think it makes you a bad DM to not allow your players to take him out with a single sleight of hand check. But using a no and gives your players more information about the world and shows that the call you're making isn't arbitrary. And using a no but, while almost certainly not Sir Mix-a-Lot's favorite option, allows you to throw your players a bone and give them a path forward, even if it isn't the path they were looking for. Now, not all of these quadrants are created equal. In fact, this grid might work better as a spectrum. I try to only use no and when I really have no other options, because that is the answer that truly shuts a player's idea down. But it is important that a DM have the ability to shut a player's idea down if they need to. No, a living creature does not count as an open container for the purposes of Create or Destroy Water. No, we are not going to play Fantasy Herbalife Simulator, Dave. There's a reason that we're playing D&D, which has rules instead of just running around in the backyard with foam swords. We save that for Tuesday nights. While it's great to be receptive to player ideas and flexible with your expectations, the world is not always going to give your players what they want. Some things you've already set in stone, and others you are inventing on the spot. But either way, you are the arbiter here. The player's reality is created by whatever you say, including sometimes limitations. Have you ever had one of those moments as a player where you attempt something and fail, and only then do you learn essential information that definitely would have changed your plan and that your character would have known? If a player suggests doing something stupid, there is a non-zero chance that they're not stupid, they just can't read your mind. Your players aren't actually standing in this palace ballroom, looking at the advisor and his wine goblet with their own eyes. They don't know if the goblet is sitting unattended on a side table or if the advisor is nursing it, like me with a White Claw at a party where I don't know anyone. Don't take this can away from me, what'll I do with my hands then? You may be picturing a manicured, formal ballroom lined with dozens of attentive guards, while your player is picturing a raucous party and 3 or 4 guards who are already a little drunk. That's why your player is asking about their idea, so you can tell them if it's viable. If you say no, that isn't you being a jerk or a bad DM, it's just you giving your player the information they need in order to play the game. You're not saying, no, that's impossible, you idiot. You're saying, no, that is not a realistic option, and here's why. If you're already a pro at reacting on your toes to player choices, you probably don't need this tool. Think of it as improvisational training wheels. If this little chart seems simple, that's because it is. But yes and is simple too, and unlike yes and, the YNAB grid, patent pending, recognizes that sometimes your role as Dungeon Master means saying no. And whether you're saying yes or no, a player's surprising idea is an opportunity to engage with and reward their creativity, and to provide them with more context so that their next idea can be even better. Speaking of tools for Dungeon Masters, I made this. It's called the Game Master's Deck of Boons and Banes, and it's a set of 40 cards designed to help you reward or punish players with exciting narrative consequences. It comes out October 1st, but pre-orders are open now. This is being published by a real big boy publisher, Media Lab Books, which means it's gonna be stocked in actual stores like Barnes & Noble and Target, which is blowing my mind. The thing about traditional publishing is that pre-orders are huge. Those numbers tell stores whether or not the product will be popular, and that affects things like how they promote it and even where they shelve it. So if you want to do me a solid and you think it sounds exciting, please consider pre-ordering the deck. You can go to ginnyd.com/boonsandbanes to learn more and place your pre-order. And just FYI, those links are all for shoppers in the US or Canada, but I've been hearing from folks in other countries that some of their local bookstores and and game stores also have this item available for pre-order, so just do a quick search and see. Okay, I'm sure everyone has left by now. That's the real reason I always carry a sword. So I'm never alone.